Well, welcome back, everyone. Now back to business with PIT, Pilot Instructor Training. So, this one day we had a Stan Val visit come down from higher headquarters. And part of the visit was they gave us a 20 question test, general knowledge test. They gave it both to the instructors and to the students. Well, this one student flunked it. Oh, good golly, Miss Molly. The kid was a little bit into the program, not far, but a little bit into it, maybe a third of the way through. So he flunks a damn test. Well, we really didn't have a procedure in place for anything like this. We'd never seen anything like it before, where a kid flunks a 20 question test like that. So I was the chief of check section at that time. I got together with the section commander and the operations officer and squadron commander kind of sat around and scratched our heads to come up with a program. Okay, what do we do with this? How do we handle it? It's not really, the guidance was not really specified in the syllabus. So we decided what we would do is send him back to his flight room and then bring him down to check section for a typical ground eval. Now, our ground evals in check section would last 2 hours. I used to call them stump the dummy sessions, where you'd sit there, you'd ask a kid a question, he'd come back, and you just sit there. They weren't really, they were kind of formal, informal. So you just wanted to see, you ask a bunch of questions about the operation and so forth. That's normal, a normal ground eval we had, but in this case, this kid really, he'd flunked the test before he got into the PIT program. He was actually in the pre-PIT program now that I think about it. So all we could really ask him about was aircraft questions, operation procedures, and stuff like that. Rather straightforward, actually rather simple. Okay, fine. So we briefed his flight commander on what we were going to do, and then we brought him into check section for an hour ground eval. He took it with a guy we called Lipwinder. Trying to think what his name was, Millspaw. But anyway, after the ground eval, Millspaw came in and said, "Boss, this guy didn't make it." He said, "He just doesn't know anything." I said, "You're kidding." He said, "No." He said, "I can't pass him." I said, "Well, you call it the way you see it. You know, if he fails it, he fails it. That's just the way it is." So he failed it. Now we Dave, actually it was Dave Millspaw. So Dave wrote it up, and we sent him back to the flight room. He got another couple hours of ground training, and then he comes back in. Now when he comes back in to see the chief at check section, which would be me. And now he's coming in for a 2 hour ground eval. So he gets in, and I start asking him some very basic questions about T-38 operations, limits, all kinds of things like that. And as it would turn out, one of his flight instructor pilots was monitoring my ground eval as part of his checkout program into the pilot instructor training program. So Pete was sitting off to the side, actually behind the guy, just listening in to me asking him questions and this kid giving me the answers. And the reason we wanted to make it a 2 hour ground eval is because he started to give us concern for actually how much he did know and so forth. So after 50 minutes or so, I excused him to go get a Coke or a cup of coffee. And Pete came up to me and said, "Hey, boss," he says, "why are you even giving him a second part of the hour?" He said, "This kid doesn't know anything." And I said, "I know, but we're going to play it by the book. This is kind of what we came up with, and we're going to play it straight." And so Pete says, "Fine." Kid comes back in, and we went about another 45 minutes, and I just finally looked at him. I said, "Listen," I said, "I just don't think you're ready to go any further." I said, you're in a world of trouble right now if you don't get in gear. And I said, the mission's unsat, and we'll talk about it and take it from there. So we send him back to the flight room. He gets another 2 or 3 hours of ground training. And then he came back to the section commander, which was Bill Ferrier at the time. And Bill gives him a 2-hour ground eval. And the kid screws it up again. And so he fails it again and goes back for more remedial training. And then he comes to the operations officer, a guy named Craig Welsh, and took the ground eval, took another ground eval with Craig. Now Craig was so easy going, and if you showed you put any initiative into it at all, you were going to pass. Well, this kid flunked again. That's strange. That really is strange. So we started digging into this, and we discovered this kid had been a co-pilot up at McConnell Air Force Base in Wichita, Kansas. And he was a non-volunteer to T-38s, first of all. He was T-38s Advanced, and he had been a non-volunteer. And then we learned he had begun a relationship with another co-pilot up there in McConnell. Although I didn't come out and ask him, I don't know if anyone ever did, but conjecture is that he might have thought if he flunked out of the program, he could probably go back and resume his relationship and live happily ever after. Well, it doesn't work that way. In undergraduate pilot training, if you flunk out, they will usually find a job for you somewhere in the Air Force till you serve out your officer commissioning commitment. If you're a pilot and you flunk out, you're a pilot. And if you can't meet the standards, and we don't have a job for you, and we'll throw you out of the Air Force. That's kind of the way that works. And up until this point, this kid didn't realize that no, you weren't going to be able to go back and pick up your relationship with Susie co-pilot. You were going to be tossed out of the Air Force. Ruh-roh. So he goes before an FEB, a Flying Evaluation Board. And I can't prove it, but my gut feeling tells me he had a little bit of insight intel from his flight commander. And he went in there, poured his heart out, how hard he was trying, this, that, and the other. And that he felt that myself, Bill Fair, and Craig had it in for him. And that's why he flunked out. Well, he didn't think about Pete sitting in the room, and Pete was able to say, hey, he didn't ask him anything off the wall or anything like that. Come on, give us a break. So anyway, they decided to keep him on board. But what they did is they said because of his adverse association with the ground eval and so forth, they sent him up to Shepherd to complete the training program. Meanwhile, after all that was said and done and he went up to Shepherd, I got called in by the DO at the time. And Ted indicated, he said, why did you have it in for him? And I said, sir, I didn't have it in for him. And I said, I didn't even have a clue who he was or what he was all about until he got deeper in the kimchi. And I said, I'll tell you what, if I had one to wash him out, I said, I would like to have some credit, if you will, that I have enough experience where I could have washed him out and no one would have been the wiser. But I said, that's not the case. But be that as it may, Ted wasn't one to stand up for anyone in this case, and so we just let this kid go on his way. He went up to Shepherd, completed the PIT program, and then went back to Vance as a 38 IP. Well, imagine that. And guess he served out his career and then went to the airlines. That's the last I heard of it. But that was just one kid that I had, ground eval, if you will, that kid was trying to game the system and it backfired on him. And another ground eval I had, I think I'm just going to piggyback this story on the first one because this one's kind of fun. I have this guy come in one afternoon, first lieutenant. Now, usually our students were either captains with prior service or second lieutenants. Well, this kid's a first lieutenant. So I had an idea, kind of what was going on. So he comes in, sits down, really a pleasant guy, nice guy. Comes in, sits down, polite. So we're sitting there after we introduced ourselves. I looked at him, I said, you're an Oberleutnant, first lieutenant, if you will. I said, did you go on to school after? I said, where'd you go to school? And he said, he went to the Air Force Academy. I said, well, did you go on for your master's after you graduated? And he said, yes, sir. I said, oh, cool. I said, where'd you go? He said, Oxford. Well, isn't that cool? So I said, can you hold on a minute? I said, were you a Rhodes Scholar? And he said, yes, sir. I said, well, congratulations. I said, but I'd like you to hold on a minute. So I got the phone, and Mom lived in town, across town. So I called my mom, and I said, hey, Mom. I said, do you remember all those years you were giving me crap for my 2.05 ACUM at Bowling Green? She must have said, yeah, I do. And I said, well, I kind of want to give you some insight to where I am today. I said, I'm sitting here with this Rhodes Scholar. I'm about to give him a ground eval, and he's sitting here sweating BBs, and I'm just as calm as ever. Well, the guy that I gave the ground eval was very gracious about it, and we laughed about it. And I always got a chuckle out of it. He went on to be a great IP, and then got into the B1 program. And then a few years later, I looked him up, and here he was, a 3-star general. Wouldn't you know it? But I really enjoyed that ground eval. And then there was Jeff Ellis. Now, Jeff was one of those kids in the squadron, just a likable guy. Tall, good-looking guy, pleasant, fun to have around. I don't know if he was taking the program serious or not, but he ended up screwing up his ground eval. So he had to come down to me as a chief of check section for a makeup ground eval. So I decided, oh, good Lord. So I came down and I sat down with him and I said, Lieutenant, I said, I think I was a major then. I said, do you think I don't have anything else to do but sit here and play stump the dummy with some second lieutenant who didn't take the time to prepare or study enough for the initial ground eval? I kind of wanted to put the fear of God into him because I didn't want to see him back there. I knew he was a good kid and he had no business being here. So I kind of wanted to shock him into it. So I started asking him some questions, and I got into it, not the normal, how many wheels are there on a T-38-3? Okay, good. No, we got into it a little bit deep, and to his credit, he knew his stuff, and I was pretty happy with it. So we come to the break after 50 minutes, and I went down and got a cup of coffee, he got a Coke or whatever. So he comes back then, and for the second half, he's wearing one of our survival vests that we would wear when we went on cross-country rides on occasion. So he comes walking in. I said, why are you wearing that survival vest? He says, because, the first half was so brutal. He says, I thought I might need it first to survive the second half. And I said, well, okay then. I said, since you got the vest on, let's talk about the things that you have in that vest. And I could just see the color in his face just drain. Anyway, he did fine, and he still hangs out on Facebook every now and then. I see him every now and then, and I sure enjoyed that kid. We had a lot of fun, especially once I got him through the check rides, and he later came back to the squadron as an IP, and it was just a joy to have him around and to fly with him. Anyway, that's just what I have for you today. Hope to see you again soon. Take care.